What is up, everyone? The 25th Genius here, back with another video. So I do have another top 10 that I want to really talk about. Well, not a top 10, it's really a top 5, and I'll explain why as I go into this video. But first, if you like the channel and what I do, or if you just really like webtoons or whatever it is of your needs right now, make sure you like and subscribe so you can be notified for more updates. But more importantly, not even subscribe to me, subscribe to your favorite content creators, subscribe to your favorite webtoon creators, because it helps them out a lot. With that being said, let's get into the video. So today we're going to talk about the top 5 best fights in webtoons this decade. Now, I put top 5 for 2 reasons. One, it's really hard for me to find really good fights that I would really think that are worth talking about. But then 2, I really want to give a chance to really flesh out why these fights that I'm going to talk about were really so good. And again, there have been some gems in terms of just scenes and action, characters, and fighting that have happened in the webtoon world over the past 10 years. So let's talk about them. Again, I just want to really thoroughly flesh out the details and why these fights were so good, and basically set up the premise of it is if you haven't read these webtoons. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So at number 5, we have Jihan Han versus Shin Woo Yu Gamer. So this is a very recent one, actually, as it's happened in the new season of The Gamer, where basically the gamer fights the leader of the Church of Mask, which is amazing for several reasons. So the Gamer, again, if you haven't watched the series, it's a really good series that you should check out, by the way, because it has basically the most broken protagonist that we have ever seen. And even the author himself knew how broken he was, that he has to scale everyone to at least be a fraction of he is, but generally he is the most broken character in the entire show. But with that being said, he basically is gifted by Gaia, which means he has a very rare ability that is only seen within a few people, even something as wide as complex as the Abyss, which is basically their home world. So upon seeing another person who has this exact same type of gift was very refreshing and very uplifting, especially since we haven't seen one for several years. We've seen a lot of very broken and very powerful characters, even gods themselves, but we have never really truly seen someone who was basically the same as Jihan Han until the Church of Mask came. Now, on the surface, the Church of Mask really doesn't seem like they are very strong, but if you really take their power down to a deeper level, it is actually just as broken as the Gamer. So the Church of Mask has something called the Divine Connection, which is basically as simple: you connect with everyone. Let's take it deeper. The Divine Connection not only connects people, but it connects thoughts, ideas, abilities, and powers. So with that being said, people can utilize powers that they have never had before simply by being part of the Divine Connection. The Divine Connection doesn't feed on someone's physical body, it feeds on their mental body. And in terms of it gives them a peace in a way. Basically, it's like a cult. It's like a cult. It gives you a peace, and it targets your mind more than any other part of your body. But with that being said, with the Divine Connection, you can tap into power that you've never had before. So for example, let's say I want to know karate, and someone in the connection of the same church knew karate. I can generally use their power as my own. What's more is that they can use it in power in ways that they never could. So they can unlock hidden potential, which is interesting because part of this fight that I'm talking about literally has Jihan Han and the leader of the Church of Mask literally using power that even the leader of the guild could never use, which I just found hilarious in just how broken that they are. But the reason why, so basically, the Divine Connection, if you ever watched the show, and I always bring it up because it's so relevant in nowadays, it's basically like the end from Marika's box, which basically enabled her to use the abilities of other people and learn them very quickly, but also tap into the unlocked power that each of those abilities have. So she basically improves on the ability that the person couldn't improve on before. So basically, she can do what others do and do what they cannot. This is basically the Church of Mask Divine Connection in a huge, convoluted, complicated nutshell. But what really makes this fight very interesting and very amazing was that it wasn't a battle of physical, it was a battle of mental. Again, a good fight it's not all just about Braun and who is stronger. It was also in this case on two factors: who was stronger and who was more mentally strong. In this fight, Jihan Han's mental abilities were also being challenged because his innate ability, the gamer's mind, slowly started to be broken because he was up against someone with the same ability as him. So it created an error which caused his power to be mitigated. Now, what also is interesting about this fight, because it really challenges Jihan's morals and how he doesn't want to kill, but in this case, was killing really the way to go in this fight? So basically, he has to figure all this out for himself. But basically, the battle of mentalities, the battle of powers being exchanged left and right, unlocking new powers that both of the characters have never had before, and definitely being a person who is on exact par with the gamer. Definitely this fight deserved a really spot on this list. At number 4, we have Adon versus the Wolf, Lumini. Now, I really did enjoy this fight for a lot of reasons. One, as I said recently, Eden is probably one of my favorite characters just in Webtoon history of this decade, just because of how sly, how cool, and how collected that he is. All of his personality was tested when he had to save his son from basically a werewolf attack, and that forces the witch Idon to go up against the wolf. I don't think he has a name, which forces Idon to really transform himself into a wolf to compete with the werewolf. So now, what I really liked about this fight was, again, just how cunning. It really shows how cunning Idon was, and it really just shows how resourceful that he is, and how much of a father that he is, that he's willing to protect his children to the limits of no end. What was really the clincher of this entire fight was the fact that he went into his werewolf mode, which really shows that witches, though they may seem lower than that of the werewolves, can definitely muster enough power to go on full par with them. This fight was an exchange of wit in itself, and it was an exchange of how Idon can use basically what he has to basically, to reach the goals that he wanted. All in all, this fight was absolutely amazing. I want to do a video about it if I never had, but definitely seeing just the wares and the equipment that Idon is using both mentally and physically as he attempts to protect his family from the likes of the werewolf and protect his family, his whole family as a whole, definitely was a sight to me. It also shows in this fight how powerful werewolves are and how strong they are, and how up against really humans or witches that really they don't stand quite much of a chance. I really like how this sets the bar that werewolves are pretty much one of the strongest creatures ever to have existed in their world. But it's kind of funny that the leader of that werewolf was actually a witch herself, trying to find her son and send a wolf to basically go and retrieve her son. But that's a different story for a different topic. Basically, this fight between Idon and the werewolf is really about Braun, but it's really more about how Idon uses his wit and uses his cunning personality to basically fight the werewolf and really just get a new respect towards witches. And it really shows us the life of werewolves too. So definitely this fight deserves a top spot on this list. At number 3, we have Frankenstein versus Cromwell, Noblesse. And just for the record, I'm talking about the very first fight between these two mad scientists. Now, let me say this. If you read Noblesse, good. You should read it. But if you've read Noblesse, there are tons of fights. And especially there are lots of amazing fights that happen with Frankenstein. Frankenstein is probably one of my favorite male characters just because of how cocky and how very intelligent he is. But the cockiness and intelligence is not self-gained. It is actually earned from centuries and centuries of him basically living on the earth and developing his power. But again, there are many fights that we can say that between Frankenstein that are probably better than the ones that I am talking about. But if I really had to pick all of Frankenstein's fight and had to select really one, it'd definitely be this 3-panel fight between Dr. Cromwell and Frankenstein. Here's the reason. One, at this point, Frankenstein and Riot are pretty much definitely the strongest characters in the Noblesse universe at this point. At this point. And two, it didn't really seem like they can be really beatable, or they seemed undefeatable until Cromwell appears and really shows us that there are other people who are just like him with power. But also, really, it's this one scene here that really drew me into the fight and that I really enjoyed, because both of them are just extreme. Both Dr. Cromwell and Frankenstein are the same. I let this be known that they are pretty much the same in the terms of they are both very confident in their abilities, both in their intelligent mind and in their power. And basically, Dr. Cromwell is the new Frankenstein of their generation. So really seeing these two cocky people who are really in tune with their abilities, who are really just very confident in who they are, was actually a treat to behold. And the fact that they were able to scar one another, which again, Frankenstein didn't seemed that weak in the beginning. He seemed pretty much invincible. Again, it was all just a really huge sight to behold. Definitely, there's not really much to say more about this fight, but definitely just this one panel. And again, there are other fights in Noblesse that I think that are just as good. It's just that this fight really was set in the beginning, and it really just again set that bar. And that's another thing too, where there are things and there are devices in stories that are just used to set the bar for future events to come. And definitely this fight with Cromwell and Frankenstein just set that bar, like not high right now, but to set the bar that there's a whole world of possibility within the villains and the organization in their world. So definitely this deserves a top spot on this list. At number 2, Bam versus Halquin, Tower of God. Now I'm going to really elaborate a lot here because this fight is very amazing. I just recently reread it, and again, it's just so powerful and so good. So you need to know this. Who is Halquin? And I kind of want to take a little bit of time to really define Halquin. Halquin is basically a regular. He is the abomination of 4 people from the Ari Sword clan who basically wanted to surpass their father, and they used a powerful binding spell to bind them all together. So in his complete form, he is known as the Slayer White, which was a treacherous, murderous slayer who basically fed on souls and manipulated people in order to use them for food. Now, Halquin is just basically a regular in his incomplete form. So these are two, basically they're the same, but they're two very different people. If he's not completed, he is the Ranker White. If he isn't completed, he is the regular Halquin. So that's just because it can get very complicated. So what happened was, he basically terrorized the tower, and he climbed the tower. He terrorized the tower. He would have been the strongest entity, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. I really could care less. I don't agree to none of that. But he was stopped by a nameless princess of Jihad. I've been trying to find her name. She's just nameless. So after being defeated, he goes to the train in order to gain his power back and feed on more souls, which then he is stopped by a girl named Ronan, who sealed him in the train forever, splitting his parts once again. So that's basically who Halquin is. Now, why is this fight really good? So I want to step to the beginning about what his name is Mother's Basement. He said this about fights and about how fights should be structured, and I really thoroughly agree with it. Again, his channel is absolutely amazing. You should check him out if you know who he is, by the way. But he said this: a fight is not between two people fighting, it is a battle of ideas. And if I really think about that phrase and that line very thoroughly, I can't help but to think about Bam versus Halquin, because these two are the exact opposites of each other. They are sun and moon that share the same coin. Both being Slayer candidates, they both just have a very, very, very distinct way about living. And it's so distinct between each other that it's the exact opposite. Bam believes in caring for his companions and saving them. Haokun just believes if they are sacrificable towards his goal. So these two are really not fighting for power. They are fighting each other's ideals, and which I really found that was interesting. Now, with that being said, Bam also was basically underestimated going into this fight. And that's another thing too, where a lot of people underestimate Bam just as a character in general. So in the beginning, when they were in the train, and it became obvious at this point, or became revealed, that Thug was going to try to resurrect one of their slayers. Of course, why wouldn't they? Because it's their slayers, by the name of Haokun. Everyone said that he could not beat Haokun no matter what he did. Even his mentor, Ji-sung, said that he could not beat it, and actually forbidden Bam to go into that to that floor, into that train, for fear of that Bam would just be immediately murdered by Haokun or White. No one thought that he could beat him, and that's another thing even in this community as well, where it's like at this point people just really think that Bam is just still too weak right now. But I really think just the opposite, especially if you've read the current chapters of Tower of God. Bam is becoming stronger at this point to where he can even fight rankers. Now, what I really do feel like what Tower of God has been doing is that they're trying to still keep their hierarchy in check, so it's really, they don't really want to reveal that Bam can really beat rankers, but in reality Bam is such at a high level that even rankers fear him. So with that being absolutely said, within this fight between Bam and Haokun, he is already underestimated going into it. No one really thinks that he can beat him. Nobody, except for one person, which is why she is my favorite person, and her name is Yuri Jihad. Yuri Jihad for a second believes that Bam could easily win and beat Haokun at his tricky game. That's another thing too, whereas the odds were stacked in Haokun's favor in this game of the Dollar Show. Within this game of the Dollar Show, both candidates had a choice to save their companions or literally just let them die to save their own skin. Of course, Bam would not allow that to an extent, so he wanted to save his companions. But Haokun believed that people were to be sacrificed for his good, so he was going to basically kill them. This enrages Bam, and Bam makes the most incredible statement that I've ever seen within the whole webtoon, in which he declares that he will save everyone and beat Haokun at this game. And he proceeds to save everyone and beat Haokun at his game. But at this point, it's a battle of mentality. It's a battle of ideas, because Haokun just cannot accept Bam's mentality or his ideals of that a Slayer should have, and that a Slayer should be ruthless and cruel and believe that they should be sacrificed, that everyone around should be sacrificed for the greater good of the Slayer. So as these two descend down, and as these two are really like competing with one another, it really seems bleak for Bam. However, now, and I will say this, okay, yes, Bam beats Haokun because of the power that he got from the Power of Souls. But I will say this going into it as well. Bam was already getting stronger as he was fighting Haokun. And when he absorbed the Power of Souls, he completely absorbed billions of souls. They had no effect on him. He's a black hole. He just, oh, was that it? Okay, let me continue fighting type of mentality. But what ultimately, this is what I liked about this fight. Not only did Bam win, he won the battle of brawn. He won the battle of mentality. He saved everyone in this train. And then on top of that, he defeated Haokun. He won 3 waves when he was told that he couldn't win. And he completely embarrassed Haokun, the Slayer, the ex-Slayer, and sent that man flying in total, complete embarrassment. You can't tell me Bam is not awesome. You cannot tell me. Because he truly is one of the strongest characters that I have truly seen. But yeah, definitely this battle was absolutely perfect absolutely amazing. However, it was my number two because I do feel like there was a fight that was just a little bit better than the fight that I described. But definitely seeing this as a huge battle of ideals and a battle of belief, which clearly Tower of God states itself. The fact that Bam was told he could not win no matter what he did, but he believed in himself to beat him 3 ways. Definitely, this is hands down one of the best fights that I've seen this entire decade. And at number one, we have Jin Mori versus Park El Pyo, God of High School. I really like this fight for several reasons. Park El Pyo is like my favorite character in the God of High School, even now and with all the new stuff that is going on. But what I really liked about this fight is that it really showed that there were people who were powerful, who were just as powerful as Jin Mori. Jin Mori was very strong before he even became the Monkey King, and the fact that there was someone who was exactly on par with him was truly amazing. I liked how Park El Pyo was probably the strongest of the three, which basically was like the three strongest fighters in high school whatsoever. But I just really thoroughly enjoyed this fight. But what I also like about this fight is that it's hilarious the fact that no one realized that he copied everyone's moves that he learned in order to be Park El Pyo. It even surprised Park El Pyo to the point where he's just like, well, I didn't know you could do that. But also what I like about this fight is that really supernatural powers start coming to play before supernatural powers were even fully established in the world of the God of High School, as fire kicks, whirlwinds, and just all forms of stuff that that could be into play. But also too, Park El Pyo is one of the few people that actually was able to beat Jin Mori, and that there are not many people who actually could beat him, but Park El Pyo definitely proved the time and challenge and was able to thoroughly handle Jin Mori as being the older superior and being more experienced in that field. What I also like was that this fight was also a training fight for our lovely future Monkey King, and that Park El Pyo was also trying to win, but also he was sent on an assignment to train Jin Mori. Again, this fight is just full of colorful powers, full of amazing interaction, full of just everything that you want out of a fight. But also, again, it's one of those things where it's not just all about brawn, it's also just about spirit, and it's also just about the person thereof. And that's definitely what the God of High School did within this fight. And that's why it's one of my most favorite fights, because honestly too, every other fight in like the Tower and like God of High School pretty much gets really complicated to the point where you just say, okay, it was awesome. But this fight is very straightforward and very succinct, and it really gets to its point, which is why it's definitely probably my best fight of this decade. But this is really just a preference choice for me. If I really have to truly pick a for real best fight, it definitely would be the one that I just talked about, Bam versus Haokun. Again, these fights are genuinely amazing, and they're the example of how fights should be carried out, not only in Webtoon media, but in comics, anime, whatever you want. This is how fights should be carried out in general. Whew. And that is my list for the top 5 anime fights. Again, I thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you in the next video.